Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I feel like I'm at a concert. This is a lot happening at once. But thank you for sticking around for the end of the day and talking to us. As I was just introduced, my name is Shenela Tavarayan. I'm the Director of Product Development from Interac Corp. For those of you who don't know what Interac is, we are the domestic debit network for Canada. So I have come here all the way from Toronto, where the weather is a little bit colder than it is here today, to talk to you about product development and product innovation and what it really means in the growing world. So let's talk about what is common today in products and in payments in general. For those of you who are in the audience, put your hand up right now if sometime today you used your phone to browse to buy something. You may not have actually bought it, but you've used your phone today to browse. Okay, look at that. There's a lot of you, right? So this is what we do. This is the commonness of shopping today. We have to be able to do it immediately. There's an immediacy of shopping that we have to account for in what consumers want. However, with this, there comes a lot of different issues. Issues in terms of fluidity, security, UX, real-time, whatever it is, this is an issue for consumers. There's a shift in the payments ecosystem that is really creating this need for an omni-channel, frictionless, across every channel, real-time payment ecosystem. So what does that really mean? So a real example of what a gap is in this omni-channel world is what we all know and love called 3DS. It was introduced to really reduce fraud in card-not-present scenarios, but 3DS had an issue. It was really inconsistent in the way that it was implemented. The UX was a little bit complicated. Customers really didn't like being taken out of the payment landscape. And then also, merchants started to really abandon it because they didn't like that customers were being taken away from their websites, from their apps. And so because of this, it never really reached its full potential, right? This is something that really could have improved what fraud was, really changed the nature of it. However, it just didn't work because the friction outweighed the benefit. So that's what we really need to look at, the concept of aligning standards across issuers and networks and platforms, and even in those concepts to ensure that well-intentioned innovation doesn't fail. So let's talk about what the data tells us when it comes to that. North American consumers trust their banks. This is what we've seen, right? The data tells us that they trust their banks much more than what's coming out of Silicon Valley, much more than big tech. And a lot of it has to do with their personal data. The banks are not monetizing that data, whereas the big techs are. So that's why most consumers do trust their banks more. They want to know, these consumers, who's holding their financial information and how it's going to be used. Not just financial information, their personal information and how it's going to be used. And then while speed matters to the payment, it's very, very important. For those of you who have been shopping today, we all know that the minute the Wi-Fi glitched a little bit, you got annoyed with your phone and stopped shopping. That speed matters in other areas as well. Consumers also expect personalization, right? So they expect not just the speed, they expect some kind of personalization that is secure. So we don't necessarily want to give our data up, but we want something that's just for us at the same time. Human beings, as always, are contradictions of themselves, but this is the nature of it. So how can we do it in a way that is going to be tailored to these consumers, where they get those personalized like coupons or whatever it is, but still they're in a position where they don't have to give up their personal data or feel like their data is going to be sold or give up as much data as they want. The way that we've seen this, and we've seen this in a number of different places in the globe, is through what we see as bank-backed wallets. Right? So we all know the Silicon Valley wallets like Apple Pay or Google Pay, but there is a new trend starting of bank-backed wallets. In the US, you guys know this as Pays. In Canada, we have our own versions that are coming, and then Europe has more. So what is so important about the bank-backed advantage? They really shine in terms of making customers feel secure. They already meet regulatory expectations, they operate under familiar protections, and they offer dispute resolution mechanisms that really build on consumer trust. So unlike big tech wallets, they aren't monetizing that data behind the scenes. So that's what really consumers don't like. They don't like the fact that you're taking something from me and then making money from it. That's not something that we like. This bank-backed data protection and consumer information protection, it reinforces trust, right? Trust is the biggest single driver of digital payment adoption. The minute a customer trusts something, they will adopt it. If they don't trust it, they won't. And I'm not talking about, this is not like the tinfoil hat conspiracy. This is baseline consumer protection, right? They really want to know that bank that they trust, that bank is going to protect them. When consumers see that bank brand, they feel reassured. I know it's really funny because most of us really, in the background, we hate and love our banks, right? It's just, the banks are annoying, they're taking too much money, they're not giving us enough interest. However, they do make us feel safe, and that's the beauty of a North American market. So when merchants see this, when merchants see bank-backed, what they see is interoperability and support, and they're more likely to integrate into a situation like this because they know it'll be protected. So where we get this idea is to use Europe as a case study. Europe is a beautiful case study. They offer North America a roadmap, right? While we can't replicate it exactly because Europe has its own unique way of doing things, we can learn from their commitment to centralize. We can learn from cross-border interoperability, as well as their regulatory alignment. The EU prioritized their sovereignty and their inclusiveness to create bank-backed wallets that really scale. So each EU country has their own bank-backed wallet, but they work together for interoperability to make sure that they work. So if I have a wallet from Sweden, it'll work in Norway, it'll work in Poland, to ensure that that inclusivity stays within Europe, but there is still this jurisdictional uniqueness to each wallet that is backed by each country's financial institutions. In North America, we have a bit of a fragmented system, and I'm talking about Canada as well. And so that fragmented system is really challenging, and because of inconsistent regulations, which make collaboration a little bit more challenging for different reasons. But also, it is very necessary for us to find a way past that for collaboration in order to ensure that these wallets are secure and moving forward. So we can look to Europe. They have unified identity, they have wallet infrastructure, and they have data sharing standards as ways to ensure that domestic solutions aren't really outpaced by global players. So we often talk about experience in terms of design and ease of use, but underneath that lies infrastructure. Plain and simply put, it's infrastructure. A centralized system like what we built in Canada means that we can apply fraud controls and risk controls across networks, not just from the edge. So that means that everything is centralized in one point, which makes it easier to access and makes it, frankly, a far better data set that will help with fraud detection. For example, when a bank updates their fraud rules, that update can apply across all of the connected networks, all of the connected merchants in the wallet instantly. So it also enables things like auto refresh of credentials, unified onboarding, and which really pushes the boundaries of what we're able to do with fraud detection on these wallets. Without centralization, every single merchant and every single financial institution or bank would be solving these challenges on their own. And that never really works well because it never really gives you that singular point of information to stop these fraudsters from doing the things that they do and to allow for customers to feel as safe as they should. So let's go back to 3DS. 3DS was introduced to bring fraud protections to card not present, right? But again, it introduced kind of a friction that hurt merchants. So we've heard from retailers that they have dropped up to 18 to 20% of cart abandonment as a result of 3DS. It's that situation where you're taken completely out of the transaction, have to go and find your phone to make sure that you have the code. All of these things are very frustrating when you don't have that with you. Without consistent enforcement across issuers, a poor UX, it became very costly for merchants and ineffective in really reducing disputes. And then let's contrast that with PSD2 in Europe. PSD2 in Europe, where the SCA really made strong customer verification a standard, greatly reduced fraud and minimized the need for chargebacks across merchants. This is something that most merchants really want to see come to North America, and it's something we should be working on together as a continent. So let's talk about the next trend that's really leading towards that concept of what PSD2 did in Europe. That is pay by bank. Pay by bank is gaining traction, and it's gaining traction fast, especially with merchants. I know that working for Interac, we have merchants knocking on our door all the time going, when is it coming out? What are you working on? How fast can we get it there? Merchants are facing cost pressure, chargeback challenges, and rising fraud. We all know this. That's why this organization still exists. Pay by bank is a payment method that really checks all of their boxes. It lowers their payment costs, it reduces fraud, it has real-time settlement, and no card management issues. That's the biggest thing, no card management issues. So we are seeing merchants across retail, utilities, travel, moving it from that pilot phase into the permanent phase, honestly, in under a year sometimes. And so these are the things that we need to keep looking at again as a North American market. So if we do pay by bank in Canada, it should be interoperable for the US market as well. Pay by bank makes the user experience seamless. Liability protections are already built in. It isn't a fringe trend. It is becoming a strategic move for the financial institutions and the networks. Big tech wallet. So this is why big tech wallets are not the answer at this time, right? They gave us convenience. Every one of us has Apple Pay or Google Pay or something on our phones right now. And it was great. It was phenomenal for the time. And we all still will use it in a degree. But it came at a cost. For merchants, it introduced complexity and limited flexibility. And then for consumers, again, there's this growing concern about how our data is being used, because we're all not sure. Excuse me. We hear this from both groups. They both want tools to protect their privacy and give clear accountability, the two groups being merchants and consumers. So big tech platforms are thriving in this closed environment, but it doesn't serve the open, interoperable future that we all need to be a part of. So these trends, the future trends to watch, are not hypothetical, right? So we talked about account-based payments, which is pay by bank. But then there's things like invisible payments. So being able to tell your car as you're driving, hey, can you make sure that there's milk that you can shop through Uber Eats at my door when I get home, right? Something on your phone. So ways for the consumer to not think about the payment. Digital identity infrastructure, again, very, very important. And then my predecessor who just spoke about AI and the movement of AI in the market. These are all things that are going to really move the needle and think about how we really need to shape our future. But again, security has to become the differentiator and not the blocker. So we can't lean back on the 3DS world where it becomes friction for the customer. We have to stick to a world where it is a lot smoother. So this, again, is where bank-backed wallets become very important because the security is built in. So it's part of the flow as opposed to taking the customer out of the flow. And one of the things, what I want to leave you with is the most important piece, right? So how do we really do this? How do we move the future? How do we move into ways that we can really work together cross borders, really across companies? And the way to really do that is with our regulators. So think of the regulators not as blockers, but as blockers of innovation, but as enablers. So in Canada, we've seen steady progress with open banking frameworks and real-time rail development, but we really need acceleration and alignment. The US, by contrast, really lacks a unified federal approach, which slows innovation and increases risk, in our opinion. And Europe kind of proves the opposite. So is that smart regulation rooted in the needs of that local population, that really local jurisdictional population, can drive trust and competition and really rapid adoption. For North America to succeed, each country must really design regulation that fits the unique market needs and that allows us to be interoperable with each other. Baseline, the coming years of real product innovation is going to require us to think beyond what is just basic Silicon Valley type of innovation, right? Payments is going to take different shapes. Your consumer is always going to require and demand us to be more frictionless. And so we need to figure out how to do it in a way that was secure, which bank-backed wallets really will do, while also giving consumers that next step, and more than anything, really helping our merchant community out with what they require. And with that, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.